working with a group that Victor, who you also saw in the video, co-founded called Third Space, which is a queer, people of color, and allies collective doing social justice organizing here in Phoenix. And each of them are going to talk about a little bit about the organizations and groups that they work with, and then some key lessons, experiences, challenges from organizing here around migrant justice and social justice issues, and then also some vision for where we want to go, how we want to build this movement bigger and stronger. So I'll introduce them each as we go, but let's start out with Teresa. Woo.
How you doing? That's kind of a heavy documentary. Thank you, Abby and Denise and Andrea, who's not here, and for putting this together, Camilo for coming out. My name is Teresa Mabry. I'm from Guadalupe, Arizona. I was born and raised here in the state of Arizona. And I am a fabulous queer Black Chicana, and I organize, and I'm a community organizer with Third Space. So Third Space came about as a result of what was happening in the state of Arizona. There's a crisis here, right? There's a lot of stuff that's going down that's super heavy and really targeting our communities. And a lot of times what we're not hearing about the queer migrant issues. So Third Space is a fabulous collective of queer folks of color and allies committed to investing in our community, but also through grassroots organizing and leadership development to make sure that the invisible is visible, so that we're working on issues that are affecting us. So what is the Third Space? Third Space kind of comes out of like the racial justice movements or the women's rights movements and groups that are marginalized and forced into a third space, invisibilized, but making it known that we're here, we're queer, we're fabulous, and you can't mess with us, that we're doing work in our communities, and we're working to make change by investing in ourselves and with our allies in the community that we're working with. So it's really important that we're moving and we're shaking, that we're doing and we're turning things out, because we have to call on ourselves first, because there's a lot of heavy stuff that's going on here in the state of Arizona, not just with the legislation, but how it's affecting our communities, and how are we going to change that. So I read this book, it's called Gender on the Borderlands. It kind of gives you a story of what's going on here, but what are we going to do here? So calling on us to step up and to lead. Step up and create change. Step up and use the tools that we have and the resources that we have within our communities and build those relationships. You see from past histories, and one of the questions that I was asked before the panel was, what were some of the struggles, or what are some of the struggles currently? So past times, we have, look at the Black Panthers. A lot of them were thrown in jail or they were shot, right? And y'all can interact with me, it's chill. I'm not. y'all can do it. So, taking care of ourselves, investing in ourselves with leadership development, but making sure that we're okay. If you're sick, that I need to make sure that you're being taken care of, because who else is looking out for us except for ourselves? But also building broader coalitions, because it's not just queer folks of colors, but it's allies. And queer as a political thing, so it's not just your sexual orientation. Are you able-bodied or not? It's not your gender identity, but it's a political identity that I and folks who are in Third Space hold dear. It's not the multiple layers of oppression, because it's like, oh, it's so heavy. I'm queer, I'm Black, I'm Chicana, and I'm a woman who's bi-gendered. No, it's that those things are really important to my identity and who I am as an individual, and who I am in the community member, and who I am at home. I'm also a sister. I'm also a daughter. I also go to church. Those are all important things and facets that are important to organizing here in the state of Arizona. So calling on who we are as individuals and using our identity to empower us and to uplift us as a common base to go ahead and move and shake things up. But also sharing those common stories that we have. So going beyond just your race, but going beyond your sexual orientation, going beyond your gender identity, and moving and making change and creating change that we want. So it's not just intersecting identities that can be taken apart, but it's interlocking identities that can't be taken apart. So the chains of oppression are going to be broken because we're uplifting each other and moving, and we're shaking, and we're creating the shake and the change within our community by stirring up the fire that so many people are trying to dampen here in the state of Arizona. So many people are trying to dampen within the U.S. It's not just what's happening here, but it's happening across the U.S. It's not just the U.S., but it's happening internationally. So that transnational thing. But also when we talk about rights, is it rights or is it justice? Now, at Third Space, we talk about justice. Why? Because usually nobody is going to give up power, and power comes from your rights, right? So there's this group, the smaller circle, that has the power, right? We fight for that power. Those folks that extends the power, extends those rights. And we're still talking privilege because the folks who are on the outer circle are still getting, they're getting screwed over even more as we continue to extend those rights. But when we talk justice and when we talk liberation, that's when we're talking real change. That's when we're talking about liberation. That's when we're talking about creating the change that we want to see and that we embody as folks who are invisibilized, not by our choice, but by other folks. Let's not talk about queer issues when we talk about the migrant justice movement. No, but our goal as Third Space is in making those invisible issues visible. The whole world is going to be a Third Space so that you can be who you are, fabulous and beautiful and fierce, just the way you are. And when you talk about a student issue, you're automatically talking about women's issues. You're automatically talking about genderqueer individuals. You're automatically talking about those folks. When you talk about migrants, you're talking about queer migrants. It's already included in that. So within this work, creating that change and organizing. So some of the stuff that we've been doing, there's also a lot of attacks on the youth, right? You see it with the ban on ethnic studies. So encouraging the youth, and I fall into the youth category, to move and shake because we have the power to do things. Encouraging ourselves because it's heavy every day going here and hearing 1611 being heard in the Appropriations Committee and getting passed. That's heavy stuff. And if y'all haven't heard about SB 1611, it's way worse than 1017. But all the other small subsequent bills that fall under that 1405, 1309, all those other things that are heavy on our community, listening to that and encouraging ourselves and stirring up what we have in this community to move forward. So going out and touching each other, and not just like, how you doing, but like uplifting and encouraging spiritually and making that movement that needs to happen within this social movement. It's not just addressing the structures of power, but also addressing the oppression that happens culturally. So where we come from. I have strong roots as a Black Chicana, as a queer Black Chicana, understanding my roots, and when I can't learn my history, there's something wrong with that, right? Yeah? No? Yeah? Okay, there's something wrong with that, right? So what are we going to do to change things? What are we doing to shake up things? We're organizing. We're organizing. So Third Space is fairly new. I'm not going to lie to y'all. I haven't been here for like 25 years, and it's fairly new. It started last year after SB 1070 got passed, right? So we've come together. It's a new space, creating those new spaces and allowing for it to be a safe space so folks can be exactly who they are and who they were called to be and who they want to be, and encourage that growth. We got some points, but that's it. So just making the whole world a third space in the movement that we're a part of. We're not a movement, we're a part of a movement, and I think we're a really crucial voice, making sure that invisibilized or marginalized communities have their voices heard, and that we turn up and we shake up things, because that's what we're here for, right? We're not going to sit here and take it anymore.
Thank you, Teresa. So next we're going to hear a few words from Diana Ramirez, who is a fabulous organizer with Puente, Arizona. And many of you have probably gone to some of the marches or kicked it, organized, volunteered, showed up for Puente stuff. So Diana is going to talk a little bit about the neighborhood defense committees that Puente has been working on supporting and developing to do organizing neighborhood-based throughout the city. And she's going to talk about some of the key challenges, experiences, and also, again, visions for where Puente is going and where the neighborhood defense committees are going.
So many probably of you, like Dia said, been to a lot of the events that Puente has run. And I know Puente is being known for doing a lot of events and marches and things like that, and mobilizing organizations here in Arizona or in Phoenix. And that's how we have now what is called the Comités de Defensa del Barrio, we call CDBs, and some of the people that were in the documentary are now part of the CDBs. And what they are, they were born after like the May 20, the May, no, it was the one when we were waiting for when the bill got signed. And we had a rally there and we got their own May 1st. May 29th. No, it was May 1st. May 1st. It was in April. I just know it was in April. I have the worst memory. So the people there in the community, they're like, okay, we just had this event, what now? What's gonna happen now? We just raised all our voice, where they just were left standing right in the middle of the Capitol grass, and they were like, so what do we do now? And they were like, well, we'll ask them. So they, on their own, decided that they were gonna organize, and they were gonna work in the communities, because like Teresa said, we all are unique individuals, and all our communities are very different, right? Like in different ways. All communities have different issues, different problems, different needs. So I started with like five people that started going into the communities and started bringing up door knocking and just really organizing the community and meeting on a weekly basis of what they wanted and just to protect themselves. It started out of what they said, like the fear of being outside with this new monster law that they were up against, right? So they organized it in their communities, and they formed 5 comités de defensa del barrio, and they were doing know your rights, and they were having conversations about how this is wrong. But it's not only Arizona, it's also nationwide and international. How we need to know the history, how it is important for us to have those dialogues, and we started from that, and we have met so many people. We saw the different things that maybe it wasn't all immigration issues, but it was also other things that were oppressing our communities. Health, our communities for the same reason are not healthy. They don't get proper services. They don't have any resources. There's the education. There's stuff going on in schools. There's stuff going on in housing. We got a lot of people right now. We have like over 22 committees that are forming. Some are stronger than others, and after me, Lily's going to talk a little bit about the committees, and they're different. Some are stronger, some in different stages, and you see how people are stepping up and they're like there's all this agitation in Arizona that people are like, we have to do something. We are already against the wall. We already need to do something. We're almost in the edge, we're almost in the edge of falling. They are doing everything they can to make people's life miserable, not just migrants, but other people, queer people that have low resources, elderly people. They're just taking everything away, and it's not. So this is what we have been, like, we've seen a lot of people from the community that their landlords were like really taking into power SB 1070. They were so empowered by SB 1070, telling them, if you do this, if you like, you have to pay us more, and if you don't, we're gonna call our pile on you. Things like that, horrible things, the community has to be empowered to face those people that feel so empowered on this on the base of this new racist laws. So, what? I was not prepared. I just found out I have to talk to you this morning. So we've been doing like a lot of the assessments and needs that we've seen in our community are health issues, right? So we've been going we had this health fair on January 8th where we just had a survey, an evaluation on the health fair, and one of the questions was, what are the biggest barriers in your community for you to access health services? And a lot of these people that we have never really been in contact with, that they just went to the health fair because they heard about it, or they live across the street, or things like that. Like, we never really had a conversation about it, but they're like, I was thinking that the biggest concern for them was going to be, no insurance, no money, the economy, all of those things, no resources. But then 61% of the people, and we had like 79 surveys, 61% of the people said that their biggest fear, like the biggest barrier to health access was evaluation, deportations, Arpaio, SB 1070, discrimination, and racism. So that really shocked me because these are people that we have never come in contact with. They're people that were just filling out their evaluation because they wanted to be put into the raffle for like some of their kids and stuff like that. So it really opened my eyes to see that we need to focus on we need to focus on our community and we need to focus on their health. Their health. If we are not providing proper health for our community, we don't do something about it. How do we expect them to be strong enough to fight against all of this? So really.
So next is Vidi Hernandez, and Vidi also is the leader of the West CDB, the Neighborhood Defense Committee, as well as an active DREAM Act organizer and fabulous kind of across the board community organizer with the community in the West Side. And so again, with great pleasure, I'm going to introduce her to talk about similar kind of questions, experiences, things that folks are working on, and vision of where we want to be going for building a movement for justice here in Arizona.
Okay.
So, I'm going to start with, well, my name is Viridiana Hernandez, and I am, unquote, and I quote, undocumented. So, I am the target of all these legislations, SB 1070, SB 1611, SB 1407. All of those, I'm the target. I'm a student, I'm 19 years old. I am in a university right now, going for my bachelor's in education and psychology, and I'm the target. I organize, I help the community in so many ways, but not really, it's not, I'm gonna help you poor people. It's no, I'm fighting for myself along the way. So, going with that is that I'm here, a member of the Arizona DREAM Act Coalition, which, do you guys, who knows what the DREAM Act is? Raise your hands, and I hope I see everyone. Okay, a lot of people. So the DREAM Act, if you guys heard about it last year, it was a hot topic towards last year that people, students all across the nation were getting arrested and going and doing civil disobedience, risking it all for an opportunity to live a free life. A little bit about my story, and I'm usually a crybaby, I'm trying not to cry. I was brought to the United States when I was 1 year old, as my mom was running away from domestic violence. And during that time, my dad was in the military in our home country in Mexico. And he actually, during that week when she came, he went back into the military for his training. And that's when she decided, I'm leaving. I'm leaving because I have just been, she had been out of the hospital like a month before after getting into a fight, and my dad had put her in the hospital. So months later, when my dad went to his training, she was like, this is it, I'm leaving. Having no one here, having no way of getting here, she brought me when I was 1 year old and came. Risking it all, doesn't matter, because she knew that whatever was here was worth it. Whatever this, idealized American dream, it was worth it. So she came, and I've been here since I was 1 year old, before I could walk, talk, crawl. Yeah, I was a slow learner. Maybe you guys are like, I was 5 months and I could walk. I wasn't. I was a year. And I went to school, graduated top 2%, and I found myself in 2009. I graduated in 2009 from high school, not knowing what to do with my life, thinking that was it. Thinking, okay, I graduated high school top 2%, got so many scholarships offered, got into so many universities, accepted, but I didn't have the $20,000 a year. So it was hard, and I worked, and I did a lot of stuff, and I fundraised, and I sold food, and I sold shirts, and any kind of little thing that's gonna get $2 closer to that $20,000 a year. And that's what I do every year. And this is my second year in college, so every throughout the summer it's like, oh, okay, how am I gonna fundraise for the upcoming semester? And this is what we have to go through every day as students. And one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is breaking through that fear. That fear of saying your status, of thinking, oh my goodness, if I say my status, what are they gonna think? But it's like facing that fear and knowing that we're not bad people, knowing that we have done a lot, knowing that this is our country, this is our home. So, and before I move on, I would like to give one person who was on the video, like going through breaking that fear. I remember a year ago I had an interview because I was working with young students and developing their leadership, and someone was like, why do you do this? They didn't know my status, they didn't know anything, and they wanted to interview me. So I was interviewed, and then I told them about my status, but I told them, can you please not put a picture about me? Or can you change my name also? Oh, can you please not put what school I go to? And that, I have that article there. I know it was about me, no one else knows, but it was about me, and I have it. 6 months later, after everything that had been going on, and I was like, you know what? This is bullshit. Like, I shouldn't have to be hiding who I am and how the great things that people are telling me, you're doing great things with these students. And so there was another interview, but I wasn't here like, this is bullshit. But then when it came down to it, I was like, okay, you can put my name, but kind of switch it. Like, my name is Viridiana, so I was like, can you put Diana Viri? And they were like, okay. So then, and I was like, okay, yeah, I did it. That's me. Like, that's my name backwards. So then, that was, about 6 months, a little bit, 6 months ago. And then, about 2 months ago, when the whole Dream Act thing was going on, it was going to put into a vote. There was another interview. Someone came interview me, and they're like, "Oh, do you want me to hide your name? Do you want me to switch it again, or what do you want to call? What do you want to be now?" And I was like, "No, I'm Viridiana. Put Viridiana Hernandez. Put that I go to Grand Canyon University. Put that I'm a dreamer. Put it all." And they did. And I have that article. So just to see how much I've grown within myself and breaking through the fear and the impact that has made not only in myself but in my brothers and sisters. Like, they're all citizens. But knowing that I risk it every day just to get this opportunity that they can all have, that they should all have, because everyone should have the opportunity of an education. Like, everyone should be able to go to school without, getting out of school with, $500,000 in debt. They should be able to go to school without worrying about what their peers are going to think if they know their last name is Hernandez. Because that's one of the things that I was like, oh, they're going to say my last name. They can't pronounce my first name. And it's always those kind of little things that I'm trying to break through. But just kind of breaking through that fear. And I would like someone right now to show us what breaking through the fear means. Yeah. You want to do it?
I didn't know what's in the video. My name is Reina Montoya, and I did this video. When was it like
Last year.
September?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
last year. So it was my first time saying that I wasn't documented to anyone at all. But my really, really close friends or my family, of course, they knew about it. And I joined the Arizona Dream Act Coalition on past year. I think it was last summer. And I used to start mobilizing, and I was like, I graduated with high school as well. It's a really similar story. With a really good GPA, I was offered all these scholarships. I'm really active with my community at my church. I'm a core member and catechist, and I've always been trying to do the best that I can, because that's the way that I've been raised. That you're not supposed to do whatever is mediocre. You're supposed to stand up for what you believe, and that you can always do something better. However, I was scared, I'm not gonna lie. It's really scary, especially after SB 1070. I was like, oh my gosh, just put me in a silhouette. I will speak, but I don't know what I'm doing. Somebody just asked me to do it, but I'll do it, but I don't know. So I just got pushed into it from one of the members of the Arizona Dream Act Coalition. But then a month after that, I was interviewed by the Arizona Republic, and I was, you know what? It's time. It's about time. We need to speak out for those who can't, for those who are even more afraid than I am. We need to put a face. We need to tell them that we're not criminals. We need to tell them that we haven't doing anything that we can to be better individuals. We want to help. Like I told them, I want to help my community. But I don't want to only help my Latino community. I want to help my Asian community, my Anglo community, because I was raised here. And I can see the diversity, and I love that. I'm a political science major and a TCL major as well, and a dance minor, which which is really awesome. It makes sense in my head.
Yours.
But I feel that we can make a difference, but we just need to stand up and empower those who are too afraid to speak. And we need to
And it's like, so that kind of fear that all our people have, like everyone has it, whether, whatever issues it is, that people are afraid to speak up. I'm not going to say, yeah, we have been organizing with the Puente, the Comités of the Committees of Defense of the Barrios, which are people who want to do something, which are people who are tired and fed up with everything that's going on. But I'm not going to tell you that it's like they're all ready to go. Because after fail and fail and fail, even me, even last couple of weeks ago, I was like, I'm done. Like, we keep on failing. We did a lot for the elections, and we ended up worse than we started with the last elections. And then everything's like fail and fail. It just feels like you're failing constantly. And there's some people who are ready, who want to keep on going. We're like, no, we'll try it again. Now we'll do this and we'll do that. But then there's those people who are at the edge who can't anymore. And we have to, those are people that we have to empower, because those are the people who need it the most. And that's what we try to do with our stories that are coming out and putting a face to everything that's going on, is to empower them. Not only that, I've learned that our stories are very, very important, because our stories are universal. We can make this universal, because a lot of the people in the comité, they may not have status either, but just like all our neighbors, they're all struggling with their houses. They, after paying it for 20 years, they have lost their houses. Besides, like, working hard their whole life, they're losing their jobs. Although, they have done all the right things, like many citizens and non-citizens, they're still struggling. When they get sick, they can't go to the doctor, or they can't afford, to give their husband, this lady, she can't afford, her husband has cancer. And because all the cuts with the Medicare and all that, they're citizens. They're still struggling with that, they're having trouble. So this is not just like an issue for this community. This is a universal issue, and our stories are what make everything universal. So that's one of the biggest things, is our stories will empower us. And then, so also with the comités is that we're tired of losing. We're tired of, the comité started from SB 1070. So right now the people are tired of being on the defensive. Like, I can't wait for the time when we're going to be on the offensive, because we're tired of, okay, so what's next? What's next? What's the next process? What's the next bill? We haven't been given the chance to breathe. And that's what it feels like. So right now, my biggest thing is we need to build power amongst those people, amongst us, amongst our communities. And power is what I'm looking forward to. And I would love to share the new strategy, but I don't know if there's time. Yeah? Okay. So the strategy that has been going on in the West and for Phoenix is that there are, who knows how many districts there are? City council districts.
In Phoenix?
Yes,
12?
Phoenix, sorry.
Maybe about 12?
There's 8. There's 8 city council districts. I would love to draw, so. But there's 8 city council districts, and then there's the mayor, right? So these are the 9 people that make the decisions local-wide, those policies, and they're the people who have power. How many of those 9 people need to be on our side to 5, right? 5. We need the majority in order to get kind of stuff going on the local level. Okay, so right now we don't have those 5. Out of those 5, we have 2 people who are with workers, who are with the labor, who are with. And then, so in District 5, this is my district. So this is the west side. That's my people. That's me. That's where it's going up. Which is around 19th Ave to 103rd. And it's not pretty square like you guys know districts are. I know. But these are the, kind of. So there's 155,000 people in this area who are registered to vote, who only vote like in the presidential elections or, kind of those big things. but they don't vote at local level. Out of these 155,000 people, how many do you think that vote during the local elections? Give me a guess. 15,000. 30,000. 40,000, 60,000. Okay. On an average, 7,000 people. People register to vote. Yeah, register to vote. Not in the, yeah. People register to vote.
District 5. Yeah.
District 5. District 5. How many of those people do you think are like lower income, impoverished, or Latino community, or other minorities, like on an average?
Up to 7,000?
Under 7,000.
What's the question?
How many of those 7,000 voters who vote are like maybe lower income, who are like in the minority sections, Latinos maybe? Latinos? Well,
55%.
55%. 1,000. Okay, so it's an average of 700 people. So as we're talking about building power, if you know about the West Side, what kind of community is on the West Side? There's a lot of Latino communities, a lot of like Latino and all different kinds of races, but a lot of Latino communities. For the past 25 years, throughout the elections, we have been, the person who has been representing us has been a person who's on the wealthier side, you know, and he's an Anglo-white, a white person with health, like wealthier. And you know, he gets his power from the northeast corner. Like this is where the majority of those 7,000 people are from, right? Okay, this whole community, I mean, if you guys know, talk about power terms, the power is right here, right? Like that's, you're thinking politicians, like why will you waste your money on this community when this is the only community that votes? So with that, I'm like, that is again, you know, BS. If you're gonna represent us, you're gonna represent me, you better take me into account. You better, you know, come to me and talk to us and say, what do you guys want? And they haven't been doing that. So for these elections that are coming up, we're changing this over. This is not gonna happen again. We're not gonna allow this to happen again. We will make sure that this community is represented. And we have already started doing that. Our plan, our actual steps started last week with the community coming together, you know, and creating a vision of what do they want to see in this community. That vision, you know, we're taking in places where people who could actually have a little bit more power and actually giving the community a win, because people are pissed off and they're kind of tired, like I am, of all these fails and fails and fails and fails. So we're ready for a win, and we're going to make our win happen these elections in August. So that's kind of the strategy, and I have to cut it, so I'm not going to give you more details because, you know, I have to go. But, yeah, but I will give you my contact info if you guys are interested in helping.
This movement definitely cannot happen without people power, and we could definitely use volunteers. We have a face, we have a candidate who we feel that is going to represent that district, but it can't happen unless, one, we get people out there talking to people about this movement and recruiting those volunteers. So if you're interested in helping this movement grow, in which we're finally going to have a politician who's accountable to the people and not special interest, this is where it needs to be. This is where, by changing Arizona and taking over the state, we need to start by taking over the city council in Phoenix. And it's going to happen as early as August 2011. This is the win that we're going to get for our people. So I urge you, you being here, you're already conscious and aware of the injustices that are going on. This is your step to really revolutionize this movement, in which we're finally going to be taking it into account. We're finally going to have a direct, you know, say and a participatory democracy. So I urge you, like Vidi has her contact info up there. I can pass around a sign-in sheet. There's a lot more bigger, better details to come, but unfortunately due to time constraints. But again, if you want to get connected, I'll pass something out where you can give me your info, or you can take note of these.
This isn't just about one district, or this isn't just about that one candidate. This is reshaping how everything works at a local level. Because I'm tired of going after bigger things when my backyard is falling apart. So this is my backyard, and I'm ready to start, get some landscaping done or whatever you do. So that's kind of what's going on.
together and close us out before we engage in questions and dialogue together. Camilo Perez Bustillo is here from Mexico City. He's a law and human rights professor at Autonomous University of Mexico City, and he's going to talk about kind of transnational community building and organizing for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions for these amazing organizers, and yeah, engage in discussion until we gotta go.
I want to start first with my respect for the compañeras and for the work that they're doing and for the movements that they represent. My name is Camilo. Some of you heard me before in the keynote. I grew up in New York, a child of Colombian immigrants, and then moved to Mexico as a human rights activist and lawyer almost 20 years ago, and have been going back and forth, and I'm trying to connect the work that we're doing in Mexico with the work all of you are doing. So the first thing is our solidarity from Mexico, from those movements, with what you've just heard, and with the challenges you're facing here in Arizona. We've learned a tremendous amount from your work, and your work is very important for where things are and where they need to be in Mexico. One of the things I want to stress is that some of us have already begun to work together as kind of a transnational network incipiently. Compañeras who were here, like Abigail and Denise, who were physically present with us representing the Coalición de Estudiantes Hispanos, who brought the case of Arizona to a space that was created in Mexico that I represent here today, called the International Tribunal of Conscience, which was the first time that we organized anywhere in the world an international tribunal of conscience focused on issues of migration, refuge, displacement, and human rights. And so we feel a real debt, an obligation again to continue supporting those movements. This video that you saw was brought by Abigail and Denise to Mexico last November. And the case of Arizona had already been submitted, in fact, before that by folks at Donatierra and Puente. And also we had folks from the National Day Laborers Network who came and participated in the hearings in Mexico. And all of that is going to be in the final document of the tribunal that we're still putting together. But already was included in an initial way in the preliminary conclusions that we sent out in November. Essentially, I just want to say that the purpose of this tribunal is for it to be placed at the disposition of movements like yours here in Arizona, but also throughout the US, throughout this hemisphere, and throughout the world. The idea is to emphasize the need to build a transnational movement that's active at each of those levels, at the global, regional, national, and local levels, and connecting struggles at each of those levels and in each of those dimensions. In terms of Mexico specifically, this is the other sort of issue I want to put on the table so that we can open up for dialogue. One is the tribunal and ways in which we can make the tribunal useful for you, for what you're facing in Arizona and what comes next. For example, bringing the tribunal to Arizona could be one possibility. I mean, whatever you think is most useful, I mean, we defer to you, but that you know that that space exists and that it has a commitment to continue to support. A duty of solidarity, as we conceive of it. The other dimension is that Mexico itself is an important case study of why migration happens. So I guess what I want to do is sort of emphasize the importance of looking at the causes of migration. I think a lot of this we know from our own experiences, from our own families, our own communities, but maybe not enough of us know it in the broader dimensions in which we work, in the media, in the public opinion, etc. Our argument would be, what we try to explore through the tribunal, and what we're committed to continue to explore, is migration as the product of human rights violations. Migration itself as a human rights violation. What we're saying essentially, and again, this goes to this issue of the causes, is that if you look at where migration happens, from whence it comes, it's the result of there not being dignified conditions of life in our home community. And that lack of dignified conditions of life is in itself a human rights violation. So for it to be thought of that it's simply that people choose or elect to migrate as a matter of free will is a great distortion of that reality. Now, in Mexico specifically, as elsewhere, but focusing on Mexico for a moment, there are certain concrete forces that produce those human rights violations. We define them as state violence, structural violence, and systemic violence. And what we're saying is that unless we combat those, unless we shape our movements and our efforts of solidarity around those as well, we're missing part of the picture. You know? That's what ends up producing 1070 and 1611 and their equivalents in Arizona and throughout the world. In Mexico specifically, I mean, not just as if it wasn't enough, is it the lack of dignified conditions of life that produce a condition that's referred to as migrar o morir, migration or death, as the only viable option. It's also what we refer to as militarization, paramilitarism, and state terror. And the U.S. government is deeply complicit in that state terror in Mexico. That produces what we describe as militarización. What I also am seeking to sort of put here before us is this issue of militarización in Mexico, which means that human rights violations intensify. It's not just those structural conditions, it's also the fact that the Mexican government is very concerned about counterinsurgency, about the possibility, which has always existed in Mexico, of armed struggle. And so that's one of the excuses. And then layered on that is the so-called anti-terror policy, which the Mexican state is also complicit in. And layered on top of that is the so-called anti-drug war. And it's not really anti-drug, and it's not really anti-terror, we all know that. But all of that produces forced migration and displacement as well, especially for indigenous communities in Mexico, for indigenous peoples, but in general, more and more. Regions like Chiapas, which at the time NAFTA was first implemented, was one of the states that least produced migration to the U.S., now are among the states that most produce migration to the U.S. And it's directly as the result of militarization and counterinsurgency in response to the Zapatista rebellion. Directly correlated. It's absolutely clear. And that's what's going on in Guerrero, and that's what's going on in Oaxaca, and that's what's going on throughout Mexico more and more. And so, something I didn't say in the keynote, I ran out of time, but that I want to leave here as an idea. Don't think that Egypt or Tunisia or Libya are so far away. One of the ways we think about it more and more, Mexico is Egypt. Think of Mexico as Egypt. Think of Mexico as one of the next Egypts. We're deeply inspired, the students I work with, the movements I work with, by what we've been seeing in the Arab world, in the Middle East, but we also see it as very close, very close. And so exactly the critique of the Mubarak regime and its complicity with the U.S. is the critique of the Mexican regime and its collusion and complicity with the U.S. The other piece of this is Plan Colombia. Plan Colombia is the model. I speak as a Colombiano. Plan Colombia is the model for what's going on in Mexico in the name of the so-called anti-drug war and the anti-terror paradigm. And that, what has produced in Colombia, what it has produced in Colombia is between 4 and 5 million people displaced by Plan Colombia, primarily Afro-Colombianos and Colombianas, and from people from the indigenous peoples of Colombia. And that's exactly what's going to happen in Mexico. It's absolutely clear, it's predictable, that if you apply the same policy, you're going to have the same results. But that's to be done here. in Mexico as it is in Colombia with U.S. taxpayer support. You know, subsidized and financed by you, by us, those of us who pay taxes in the U.S. And so I think we have to try and put those pieces together. I know many of us are thinking in that direction, but just we hope that the tribunal is one space, one among many, where we can draw these connections and these convergences. And again, my respect, my admiration for the work that all of you do.
So we're gonna open it up for questions for the, I guess, 10 minutes technically that we have left. I actually have a question.
Can you speak up?
Yeah, sorry, here,
The
so
word.
one thing, I've noticed especially some of the rhetoric around the DREAM Act, we tend to try to describe how deserving people are, top 10%, like grades and everything. And I'm wondering, are we seeing it all then if you have a teenager who's made mistakes, or someone who hasn't been in school, either becoming a separation on the community, and is anyone feeling not included or hopeless because they may not fit that kind of perfect image that keeps being put forward so that we can counter some of the negativity and slander that's coming. So I'm just wondering if you feel like that's happening, and what can we do to maybe make sure that the image we present is more all-inclusive? With that, I think that the DREAM Act, before it used to allow, give the students this volunteer and they could do all these other things. Right now that's what they're making it seem, that only these top, but we're leaving behind, I actually was not such a great student coming up, and then it was like the last year that I put a lot of effort because, I wasn't a great student in freshman year. I was like, I don't care, whatever, I'm not gonna do the summer project. And I know that if it weren't for my mom who really pushed me to do better, I wouldn't have ended up in how I did end up. And I do understand that there are a lot of students who do not have that support from their parents, who are even within our same circle. I am privileged. I was privileged. So I think that is where we come in our community is to help those students, because we can't just let them not succeed. So I think that's what one of the biggest things with our DREAM Act Coalition is we do go to high schools, we do talk to them, we do give tutoring, we do work with those students. If they are not doing that grade, we'll find a way to make them do, because we have, they did great, like I did, 2%. I'm book smart, but you put me on the street, I'm probably not that very street smart or very artistic, but then we have those students who have that art, the passion for the art and for the music, and who maybe not be that book smart, but we can help get them along. And I think also right now in Arizona, there's also this proposal for only military kinds of thing, and that I completely disagree with. They're just using us now. They're saying you'll get status if you join the military, and that's actually what is it called? A proposal that is already that was made in Arizona. Initiative.
I saw, sorry, please, a hand in the back.
So it's not a very profound question, but just out of curiosity, is there any coordination going on? Because I know that there's people in the East Valley who are circulating petitions right now to recall Russell Pierce. And I'm just wondering about the coordination, because it's not gotten a lot of press.
Actually, part of the comités are people that are going out there, and so they're doing so many things. I could talk about it so long, so I can.
Oh, yeah,
There's so many things they're doing. They're organizing different events. So part of one of the things they're doing with the help of other groups in Mesa as well is going out there and trying to get those images.
Yeah, like Diana mentioned, there's 22 committees around Arizona, and there's one of the first original ones is on the east side, and that's the East Comité. So when they heard about that, we were in contact with, because there's 2 different recalls. So we were in contact with both of them and see how are we gonna help? It doesn't matter which one we help, like, we're gonna do it for both then. So yeah, it's them, the East Comité, which is focused on that, and then other people from the other comités who are going, you know, on Saturdays to help.
Would it be possible to send around a list for those who are interested in getting involved with the activity of the tribunals or GCD house? Sorry.
If somebody has a
Could you
sheet
start
of paper.
a list and then
Here, coming down here.
Yes, I want to applaud your efforts to get people to vote. That has bewildered me for years. I don't understand this. People say, my vote doesn't mean anything. Well, look at the figures you've got there. You see the figure, 700 people who do vote, who do care. That's the reason we have the legislature we have now.
With that is that we've been beat down so bad that it just feels like it doesn't work. Like, what's the point? And I'm not gonna lie, because I was saying that last time. But I was like, what's the point of it? I'm not, you know, it's true. We've been beat down so bad, but right now that we have this curved picture, and you know, I've been able to get these numbers that some amazing person shows that was able to bring down and make it so real. Like that's why it's like, okay, it does matter. So it's making this like a big deal.
I just want to say, in response to that, I concur, but only if it's part of a larger coordinated strategy, because right now, last time around, in my district, the Democrat ran in a pro-SB pension 70 platform, the Democrat. And so, and we have a lot of Democrats that are more than happy to get, to just start with the framing that the Republican Party has, and then work within that framework to make maybe some sort of a slightly different argument, but that really never calls into question the overall claims made by the Republican Party. Well, yes, of course we're being invaded, but we should deal with the invasion by militarizing the border, not by Act 1070. Well, wait a minute, come down. And so I agree, voting needs to be part of the strategy, and voter registration, better participation does need to be part of it. But if that's all we're doing is just register to vote, I'm not convinced that by itself it changes the damn thing. We need to be holding the Democrats accountable as well, and we need to be letting them know that we're not going to tolerate that type of behavior from them.
So I think that's awesome. Like, we do have to be super intentional in what we do and super strategic in what we do. We can't just kind of go like, oh, we're just going to do this tactic just for the hell of doing tactics. But we're kind of on the rebound right now. We're playing catch up. We're on the we're behind the game. So it's super important that we're intentional in everything that we do, and that our tactics, like this right here, reflect what we're trying to do and what we want as a community.
Yeah, this is in direct response to both of these, that the Democrats are taking this for granted. And the Green Party is very real. I'm in the Green Party, even though I'm wearing red. It's the alternative. And we really want to reach out to these Latinos and people of color. Can you tell me maybe, Viridiana, which legislative district this District 5 is in?
13, District 13.
13. I don't think we had a Green candidate for the State House this last election.
Yeah.
But the Green Party is in, oh, that guy is split.
And this is that's Steve Gallegos.
Oh, Steve? Oh, yeah, he's introduced a good bill. He's a Democrat, but I think he's a Congress.
He's the one that's forcefully against SB 1611.
Yeah, he's in the Senate.
Yeah, he's in the Senate.
It's a very simple question. Who is the we here that we're talking about? Because it seems to me like it's a we that's very sort of localized. Are we not speaking of a broader we, the people's movement of which Dr. Bustillo was speaking of, worldwide people's movement? And who is the other that we speak of? Like, who is the enemy? Is it just the state of Arizona, just the United States? Do we really have a good imagination, a good imagery of what the strategic field looks like for the Allies, for not who we should be moving against and for?
Can I respond? These enemies have names, and they're in our legislature. And we can follow the hearings, or we can just read the newspaper.
What I mean, it's not just the state, it's not just this particular state,
Right,
is
right.
it? I mean, isn't this happening in Mexico? Is this happening in
happening.
Italy? Is happening in... Why are we doing this just, is it really by reforming the state of Arizona that anything's gonna be done?
So, not in reforming, but in liberation, but understanding within organizing, you have to touch your base. And once you start moving from your base, building those broader coalitions and extending from there. So a lot of times, especially here in the, so when we speak of the we and the others, usually it's folks who have the power to make decisions over what we want in organizing language. So the folks who are affected, and usually poorly affected by the legislation. And oftentimes we talk about legislation, but it's also policy, right? But we're mobilizing, organizing our bases, and then going outwards, like a spiral kind of. But connecting the different spirals that are happening all over the world, because it's not just happening here in Arizona. It's not just happening in Mexico. It's not happening just in Egypt. It's happening all over the places. So how are we going to open up the dialogue to go ahead and connect these conversations and how folks are doing it around the world?
Do we have a, is there, I mean, I'm probably totally ignorant here. Is there a database of groups around the world that are working in the same struggle besides the tribunal? And are we working in that with the World Social Forum, for instance?
Yes. At least the tribunal is a start, and there are now a lot of networks of different movements of displaced migrant refugees around the world that are connected. Like during the tribunal, when we went to Mexico City, there were people from Africa, from Asia, and of course, this is the first time that the Tribunal of Conscience of People in Movement was held. So this was the first effort to try to bring together the whole continents and the world connected. And we have to move forward and build more of those connections. Right now, Camilo is here, so it's a good opportunity for the different organizations like Third Space, Puente Tona Tierra, REMAC, everyone, Repeal Coalition, everyone, to kind of start connecting more, and the possibility of doing even staging a tribunal here, or thinking how can we go and unite with other people working in the Philippines, working in I don't know, the Middle East and so many other places like Africa, and being able to connect more those networks.
I also think that something that I applaud everyone, and everyone here, just everyone's great. Very positive-minded people wanting to make things or improve things for our communities. But the conversation between working with the problems of poverty and class and social economic issues and all of the things that are tied into that, and how important it is to keep at an organizing level to address those real day-to-day issues while also combating this huge migrant migrant rights movement. So there is the tribunal and the World Social Forum, but also having that connection to the community so that it's palpable and you can actually bring that, make it relevant, right? Because it's so easy to just work and suffer. But when it's relevant and it's something that you experience with other people, it just makes the importance of organizing and also building Facebook connections internationally. But I just wanted to applaud you guys and also kind of remind ourselves that that's a very important thing.
So we're about out of time, so how about let's take this last question, and then maybe if someone has a pressing one after that.
It's not a question, it's more a suggestion. I heard that someone mentioned the enemy. I think that we have to be careful about the kind of semantic we use or the word we use. Enemy has a militarized conceptualization, and I think that we should be aware of that, because one of the reasons that the discourse of the Democrats, of the Republicans and Arizona is they have dehumanized immigrants and labeled them with specific categories, because there's a lot of ignorance about all the contributions that immigrants do to the U.S. economy and society. So probably we should call them our opponents, or using a different word, but not our enemies.
And then I guess my last question going with that, like why are we going up national wide? And or you know, I think that a lot of us, when everything happened in Arizona, we tried fighting it straightforward with Arizona. The truth is, things have been getting worse. There's now SB 1070 like on steroids, as some call it. So working on our own backyard, that's one of the biggest things. Is that like once we have, you know, my district, and it's only my district, but it's only in Phoenix, the biggest city in the state. How is that not creating power? People who have already agreed that they're going to work with our agenda. So how is that? That's the power that we need, and then we can really do some bigger things. Because going just after a state where everything is just not going to happen. I don't care how optimistic we are and idealistic, it's not going to happen at the state level right now because we don't have that power. No matter how many people marched, and I was one of those who marched, at the end of the day, they still pass all these legislations because they're not afraid of whatever we can do because we don't have power. And one of the things for this is that we're building power in our own base, in our backyard, with our people, and sharing our stories like someone over here mentioned, to make this thing universal. It's not just about this migrant issue, it's about people not being able to put food on the table for health costs or for food or for the economy. And that's what we're trying to do right now in the West. And then another thing is that I was, Camilo's message that if anyone thinks that people are just choosing to come here, like that is so wrong. Like no matter how many laws they make in Arizona, no matter how much you will try to criminalize us, people are still gonna come here because the hope, like I've said before, the hope of what is here is better than whatever's in their home country. I don't care how many laws you put, I don't know what kind of borders you put, they're gonna find a way. And that's looking at the real causes of why migration is happening and not just, you know, and that's what people are ignoring are the real causes.